When the 16-bit generation hit in full force during the early 90s, many popular gaming franchises prior to it would find continuations on the new hardware. Massive visual enhancements, quality sound upgrades, longer gameplay experiences, and play mechanics difficult to manage on prior hardware were the name of the game here. For many of these games, the upgrades were well beyond imagination and were downright awesome at times. In 1992, the Adventure Island series would also get the 16-bit treatment. Released on the SNES in Japan, the United States, and Europe, Super Adventure Island took the series back to basics. It stripped some of the additions found on the prior Adventure Island 2, while still featuring the obligatory heavy visual and sound upgrades as well as some of its own unique elements. In Super Adventure Island, you control Master Higgins as you run, jump, and swim your way through 5 chapters, each housing 3 stages and a boss fight at the end. At your disposal are hammers and boomerangs for attacking. The hammer allows you to target enemies with a classic arced shot. The boomerang also allows you to shoot in multiple directions. A super jump can also be activated by pressing down and jump, allowing you to scale vertical stages faster as well as clear larger pits with ease. A couple of classic Adventure Island features make a return as well, including the fire shots from the very first game as well as the famous skateboard the series is well known for. To make things challenging, the slightest contact with any enemy means it's lights out for a topless hero. Also adding to the challenge is a timer meter that constantly drains. Picking up fruits along the way helps replenish it a bit, but once it's run out, it's instant death for Master Higgins. If you've never played it before, one of the very first things you're going to notice in Super Adventure Island are the bright, colorful visuals. From the pink treetops meshed with the blue water on stage 2-2, from the green tent and blue sky of the great tree on stage 3-1, the colors really pop out more than most Super Nintendo games. The game is also filled with large sprites and a good bit of subtle background scrolling, which really gives it an arcade-like aura. The soundtrack complements the visuals perfectly, with a fairly lax soundtrack ranging from R&B to early 90s pop electronic music, to reggae and even chill out. With the aesthetics and generally fun gameplay combined, Super Adventure Island can be a joy to play. Now before we go any farther though, I'd like to state that I've always been a big Adventure Island fan. Back in the early 90s, the Super Nintendo incarnation was one of my absolute favorites at the time. I really couldn't find fault in it then. Granted, I was just a kid, one far less susceptible to the jaded personality of a grown adult, but pulling it out in 2011 for this review, I was ready to give it its due chance, minus the rose-tinted glasses. With that, I can say that this game isn't quite perfect, and what I'm about to say may even sound a bit nitpicky. Regardless, here are my 3 biggest complaints with Super Adventure Island. So here's a question for you. Did you feel comfortable spending a few hours working your way through Super Castlevania 4 once you became familiar with it? Was it fun? It was to me. Super Ghouls and Ghosts perhaps? How about Super Mario World? What about even Adventure Island 2, which came before Super Adventure Island? That surely didn't take less than a couple of hours. Well, don't expect that kind of length in this one at all, trust me. Despite boasting nearly 20 levels, the stages themselves only take a minute or 2 to complete, and that's at the most. Literally. Sure, this is nice for the types that just want a quick pick up and play experience, but for everyone else expecting a semi-lengthy SNES experience, or at least a lengthy one compared to the NES days, it's an experience that'll last all of 20 or 30 minutes once you become familiar with it. Also, I must point this out, the short length of the stages also hurts the soundtrack. Yeah, you heard me right. The music tracks in the game are actually long and dynamic, unusually so for a game of this period. The stages, however, end before the music can actually peak. Sure, the tunes are still awesome regardless, but it just feels like the stage length is undermining one of the greatest aspects of this game. A lack of a sound test menu also compounds on this. The Act 4 boss in particular has a very muddy looking background with dark, bland colors, not exactly par for the course considering the rest of the game. The animation on the boss is also pretty bad, although I admit that both these details might have been much less noticeable had he actually been a challenge. Another minor qualm I have in the visual department are the Mode 7 effects. They do little to add to the game, they actually feel pretty tacked on for the most part. Now, while I actually like the goofy enemies in the game and their simplistic nature, the scarcity of them tends to leave the levels feeling barren, empty. deserted. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but the game really could have benefited from having more enemies on screen at once. As a longtime Adventure Island fan, the series to me has been as much about its difficulty as anything else. In the classic games, you're often forced through in a rushing manner. The levels weren't quite littered with foes either, but the general nature of it was far more challenging with devious enemy placement and a time meter that actually mattered. In the classic Adventure Islands, you were often begging for another fruit to appear. There was a sense of urgency that kept you pressing on as quickly as you could. In Super Adventure Island, any difficult segment can really be overcome by simply inching your way forward as opposed to being forced to rush like before. It makes for an extremely simple experience once you get the handle on how the system works, and it's quite easy once you get the hang of it. Alright, so all complaints aside, I have to say I still love this game. Sure, it's not ruthlessly difficult like the older games in this series, but maybe that's part of what makes it special. Combining the lax difficulty with the bright visuals and excellent soundtrack, it's just a great time every time I turn it on. Not feeling constantly on edge while playing makes it more of a sit back and relax experience more than the other ones, and for those interested in trying out this series for the very first time, I would even go as far as to recommend you try this one first before the others. It's relatively cheap these days with the cartridge only version of the real thing going for just a little over $10 these days, and there's even a version on Nintendo's Virtual Console available for a bit less. So with a price like that, and you've never played it before, you really can't go wrong with Super Adventure Island. So anyways, with that guys, I'm out. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll be back with another video sometime soon. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I will catch you soon. Take it easy.